I went to college and spent a lot of time reading a lot of old and not so old books and poetry that were pretty good. However, the most valuable thing I got out of college was a completely different perspective on how to engage with literature, because you can't simply read something like Sacred Emily the same way you read Shakespeare. Or, well, you can, but it's not going to go very well. This principle is true in the case of video games as well, as the wide variety of Game of the Year nominees from this year demonstrate. Is Balatro the same kind of experience as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Not in the slightest. But given how many units a simple indie game sold, coupled with the sheer amount of time spent playing it, and the consistent quality the game demonstrates, it 100% deserves consideration as a game from 2024 that had a huge impact. Shadow of the Erdtree is a contentious one, because it's a DLC and not a full game, but besides the issue of semantic qualification, I cautiously submit that most people acknowledge that it was phenomenal, being as large as many standard games these days, and superb beyond all expectations one might have for an average DLC. Black Myth Wukong, not a critical success per se, but definitely a fan success, and as was discussed with Baldur's Gate 3 last year, an absolutely massive concurrent player count for a single player game, earning it a place among nominees for sure. An English degree taught me that there's no one way to write a story, and more often than not, the way you go about it is more important than the specific things you choose to say. The same principle is true about video games. There's no one definition of what a video game is supposed to be, and that's wonderful. This video is not meant to convince you that video games are worth consideration to the same degree as literature, as by now that point is already abundantly clear to anyone willing to engage with them. Instead, this video is meant to tell you about some of my favorite video games, why I think they're fun, why I think they're good, and to give you games to look for on sale to play when you have free time. This video is meant to be a degree of shameless self-indulgence as I info-dump about my favorite games, but ideally in a way that demonstrates that every good game brings something completely unique to the table, and leaves you with a new perspective on some of the games that I bring up. So to start, one thing that I think should be abundantly clear is that games are meant to entertain, and there are a lot of ways that games can go about it. Brutally difficult games like Celeste, Cuphead, Dark Souls, Darkest Dungeon, and Don't Starve are entertaining by providing challenges to overcome. Games that want the player to think, like The Last of Us, Metaphor, The Talos Principle, Pyre, and Life is Strange, want us to entertain ideas in a way that video games allow us to engage with differently from other kinds of media. And games like Castle Crashers, Deep Rock Galactic, Golf with Your Friends, Mario Party, and Pico Park allow friends to entertain each other with their frustrations, betrayals, and teamwork. The game that I think does the best at sheer entertainment has to be Borderlands 2. As evidenced by most of my friends never wanting to play with me beyond the first few missions, it's not entertaining to everyone. But as I've been thinking about this video, it's occurred to me that there's a very different vibe to Borderlands 2 than the other games I've mentioned and the ones that I'll get to later. It strikes a very interesting balance of being so saturated with parodies, satire, and stupid crass jokes, while still also trying to tell a story that, while not deeply meaningful, is generally a good vehicle to move the gameplay along. It goes from high to low to high emotionally without losing the thread of being genuinely funny almost all of the time. It's the ultimate realization of the question, hey, you know what would be funny? Iterated on again and again and again, and to me, it seems most designed to merely entertain in the best way that idea can be represented. At its core, Borderlands 2 is very good, non-realistic gunplay, married to a meaningful skill tree that lets you emphasize different ways to win fights, with iconic cel-shaded graphics and some of my favorite voice acting that ranges from excellent, poignant deliveries,
Dad, I have to tell you something. You're an asshole.
to actually just screaming at you to shoot them.
Shoot me in the face! In the face! Do it! Shoot me in the face! Face, 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 face! Now! Bullets in the face!
The side missions are similar, where each is usually a realistic request that is then wrapped in absurdity to the point of madness, and each of them reads almost like an inside joke from the developers worked into a concise, enjoyable 15-minute series of objectives. The two that most readily come to mind to me are the oddly earnest confessions of Dr. Tannis as you explore the old doll mining facility in the Caustic Caverns, and Claptrap losing his absolute mind as you consistently fail to laugh at his jokes while freezing bandits out of their bases.
How are you not laughing right now? That was f***ing gold!
There are definitely some elements to the game that are too disrespectful or too crass a decade and a half later. There are a number of missions that I don't do when I replay it, and there are a few moments, particularly with Scooter, that make me really uncomfortable. However, I also think that Borderlands 3 seriously missed the mark with much of what they chose to politically correct, and tried to do crass humor without the right level of disrespect that makes Borderlands 2 work. I don't have much to say on how they could make it better. I only hope that Borderlands 4 manages to pull a Pikmin and recapture the excellence of number 2 in a new way. Aside from the roughly 15% that doesn't sit well, the bulk of Borderlands 2 has aged very well, and I still boot it up and play through it every once in a while because it's just good entertainment. Finally, one word for Handsome Jack in particular. I can't imagine a world where current Gearbox and current 2K really nail Handsome Jack, so I hope he's not involved in Borderlands 4. But as a relic of Borderlands 2, he's such a fantastic character. Damian Clark gives such an excellent performance, and his ability to genuinely laugh at the horrific things that Jack finds funny is a rare gem that I'll be both amused and horrified by for a long time to come. Overall, Borderlands 2 is one of my favorite games, and even if it's far from perfect, it's got so much charm and delight that more than makes up for the ways that it lacks.
Spoon. A freaking spoon, and I'm dying laughing, right? So I scoop out his stupid little eyeballs with it, and his kids are like, wah! And I can't even, he can't see where he's going, he's bumping into stuff, and anyway, I don't know, maybe he had to be there. The moral is, you're a total bitch.
Another thing that games are meant to do is be engaging. This can be intellectually, as in puzzle games, strategy games, and strategic action games, visually, with creativity, grandeur, and style in various ways, and orally, with excellent soundtrack and voice performances. For me, the game that nails the engagement factor by targeting all of my whole brain at once is Baldur's Gate 3. You see, my brain has 3 sections. The bottom layer is the part of me that, when I don't sleep enough, is constantly playing the last song I listened to on repeat without stopping until either replaced by a new one or I get enough sleep. The middle layer is the one that's constantly set to input, looking for data on anything and everything and constantly getting distracted by things in the corner of my eye. And the top part is the part that actually thinks about things and needs distractions. Baldur's Gate 3 has an excellent soundtrack, is full of little details to notice, and is all turn-based strategy throughout. I never played Baldur's Gates 1 or 2, but I have played a lot of D&D, and while my experience playing D&D IRL is very mixed, I've done 3 full playthroughs of Baldur's Gate 3 and would certainly have finished another playthrough of it by now if my hard drive had the space for it. Baldur's Gate 3 takes the framework of D&D 5th edition and improves on all the things that people have had issue with for nearly 10 years at this point. My first playthrough was with a Beastmaster Ranger, which I never would have done if I had to take my action to let my beast companion attack. I also never would have thought that a video game would have been able to capture the feeling of freedom that a good D&D group can provide, but here I stand, 400 hours later, still wanting to go back for more because of all the cool things you can get up to. I don't have much footage because, again, my hard drive weeps at my casual install habits, but you can find many compilations of all the crazy things people get up to with all the freedom the game affords them. One of my favorites is the owlbear from the top rope, lovingly recreated here because it's stupid, it takes advantage of death mechanics being generous, and it's just so stupid. The main story is fine. It's alright. It was cool the first time through, and it's a fine medium to move the characters through the game. D&D storytelling, particularly in licensed D&D worlds, has always kind of given me the feeling of trying to fill a massive empty room, because the roof on the power level of various beings in-universe is pretty dang high. Whatever current threat terrifying the city, nation, or world has to feel threatening from the scope of the player characters without stepping on the toes of the entities that could actually threaten reality as such, which just doesn't land as well as it does in smaller worlds like The Legend of Zelda or The Witcher. Given the vast breadth of multiple continents, planes of existence, and potentially multiverses, it's hard to create a threat that feels significant while trying to keep in mind all the particular groups in existence, but Baldur's Gate 3 does a good enough job. The real meat of the game is, as it always should be in D&D, in the character relationships. It's a crying shame that according to in-game canon you really shouldn't be long resting that much, because so many of the long rest camp scenes are golden. Many of the individual origin characters' backstories are tied to their romance options, which means you're not likely to get the whole experience of an origin character without a playthrough for each. But from the 3 romances I've done, being Shadowheart, Astarion, and Karlach, it's definitely worth it for each. That's not to mention all of the excellent NPCs who show up with great stories that happen around or as a result of your party's actions. Every voice performance is just stellar, from the excellent Barkus Root to every animal you can talk to with Speak with Animals. It's just so delightful to have consistently well-written, well-voiced characters throughout the whole game, and the amount of care given to each is evident in every interaction. Baldur's Gate 3 is spectacular, and is exemplary of the best turn-based combat you can have. If you haven't played it, I understand, turn-based combat isn't everyone's jam, but if you get the chance to give it a try, I would recommend you take it, as you might be surprised like I was. The next thing games should do is challenge you. Not every game, surely, as some games are meant to comfort, invite, or amuse exclusively, but one of the core elements of most games out there is that numbers go up. These numbers can include the amount of a resource in your inventory or storage, the amount of health an enemy has or the quantity of such, or the numbers in your stats as your character progresses. The best games can make every challenge feel fully surmountable while still asking a great deal of your skill and attention, and one game that I think highlights that, for the most part, is Valheim. I'm shocked every time I remember that this game is only 2 GB large, because it's some of the most fun that I have ever had in gaming. Everything about the game invites the numbers to go up without, to me, ever feeling like a meaningless grind. The farming is simple, but provides major benefits for gameplay. Gathering resources is almost always associated with increasing skills. Every combat action bar rolling is something your character can get better at, and enemy variety is remarkably strong, with no real copy-pastes across biomes except skeletons, which are honestly a fair exception. All this, with great bosses at the end of each biome, means that each step of progress you make is marked by meaningful challenge that then enables you to progress to the next biome. In each biome you enter is a significant increase in difficulty as well. You always start each biome as the weakest kid on the block, but eventually get to parity with enemy strength, where they'll still ruin your day if you let your guard down, but you have your place on the playground. You also eventually upgrade your armor and weapons, and develop greater skill at navigating the biome and the enemies that spawn, which make it so that you leave each biome feeling confident and ready to have your pride served to you on a platter in the next biome. Part of how this all works, though, is that the game very rarely forces you to engage with difficulty. The only time the game will force it on you is when your base gets raided by an enemy group, which is also tied to your world progression in the first place, so it very rarely actually causes problems. With the addition of Hilder's quests, we were surprised once when the boss from one of the dungeons showed up on a raid, which led to at least 7 deaths for me, but even with that as an option, it was easy enough to keep them away from our base that it didn't destroy anything, so it sucked, but didn't ruin our lives. Other than that, you never have to go to a biome if you don't want to. You obviously won't progress, but if you want to stay home, build, farm, take care of animals, organize stuff, and decorate, you totally can. In fact, it arguably works best when you have people who are dedicated to building, cooking, crafting, and farming, as Iron Gate recently added skills that give you a chance of getting extras when you gather or make them. Since these skills are also slow to raise compared to others, it's really nice not to need to risk your precious skills in combat while your friends go and gather resources for you to expand your domain. Finally, a note on my favorite part of the game, exploring. Even though the game is procedurally generated, traveling around the world is a marvelous experience. The game is really pretty, and uncovering the map is just another form of numbers going up. The music that plays when you're sailing in the ocean just resonates with me, and I personally have never minded the portal travel restrictions because it gives me an excuse to go sailing some more in the service of numbers going up. But even beyond sailing, the way things spawn in the world often just leads to a satisfying stream of discoveries, with everything except the Mistlands, which are miserable to go through at all times because you literally just can't see. Besides that, exploration is great. Games that can marry challenge and progress are among my favorites, and Valheim is chief among them. It's cheap, it's a small install size, and it's one of the best games to play with friends if you can get a good world going. My siblings and I have recently been playing, and this is the progress my brother has made on building our new home. I'll definitely do a house tour short when it's done, but we've been on many a stone run to feed his vision, and it's been totally worth it so far. Often, games are meant to be an experience more than entertainment, where whether through story, visuals, symbolism, impressions, or vibes, the game is providing something beyond just the movement of a character through a world. We get visual novels, walking simulators, point-and-click adventures, and even a resurgence of FMV games that are usually meant to push the boundary of storytelling in video games to their limits. However, some of the best games are the ones that marry fantastic experiential design with excellent gameplay. Some of these games include God of War 2018, Like a Dragon franchise, Outer Wilds, Tunic, and, relevant for this video, Elden Ring. I, like many other people on this planet, was pretty depressed during the start of COVID-19. And while I certainly had a blast playing video games with much more freedom than I had before, I also fell into a rut where I just didn't have much I cared about. Then, if my memory serves me correctly, on my brother's recommendation, I started watching Aoife Wilson and Johnny Chiodini's Let's Play of Dark Souls on Eurogamer. It was delightful, because Aoife is a delight, and Johnny is very good at coming up with bits, and I decided to go back to my impulsive purchase of Dark Souls Remastered on Nintendo Switch and give the game another go. I had fallen off because I didn't know what I was doing and leveled up my character poorly, so I started over and decided to follow a guide instead of going in blindly. I honestly recommend this, following a guide, whether online or with a backseating friend, because once you clear away all the ways the game punishes you for your ignorance, the game becomes instead an experience in overcoming challenges, rather than getting stabbed in the back every time you walk around a corner. I did this for Dark Souls 1. I owned Dark Souls 2 for PC at the time, but my laptop was not great, so I played Dark Souls 3 next, then tried Sekiro, sucked at it, played Bloodborne, went back to Sekiro, adored it, and then eagerly awaited the day when Elden Ring would release in 2022. I played the heck out of it until I beat it, then got all 3 endings and all the achievements, and was very pleased with myself. Then I was empty, because I just wanted to keep playing but didn't have a good reason to do so without more numbers to go up. So when I finally had a good PC to use and my brother bought it on Steam and joined my Steam family, I played it again on PC. Then, when Shadow of the Erdtree came out, I played it again to have 2 characters ready for the DLC. My main character for my first full PC playthrough, and one for a more level-accurate playthrough whenever I wanted to come back. And I always want to come back because the game is such an experience. There's so much world to navigate that looks so good. There are so many secrets in the game, so many cool things to find and look at, with a soundtrack typical of all of From Software's best games. It's just a great feeling to get onto Torrent and run around killing things and exploring areas to get the stuff you need for whatever build you're working on for your current playthrough. I always default to two-handed greatswords personally, but my first run was an intelligence build, when that was the most stupidly overpowered option. There's very little I can say that hasn't already been said about Elden Ring, so I'm not going to try except in one case. At its core, the reason I love Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Another Crap's Treasure and other brutally difficult Souls-likes is that when they're done well, they're consistent, fair, and have a lot to say to you as you go through the game. Every time that a From Software game stabs you in the back because you didn't look around the corner, it's like the game is disappointed in you because of course there was going to be a guy standing around that corner. There was a guy around the first corner you walked past, there was a guy around the 4th corner you walked past, and everything in the visual design of this corner says that they were going to put a guy around it, so why didn't you think that there was going to be a guy around the corner? All of the enemies, while far from easy to fight, or even fair in the first place at times, are consistent. Even Melania, and even Prime Consort Radon, are consistent enough that those sickos who care to can learn their entire moveset front to back and beat them every single time. These games ask you to get good because unlike in many other games where combat can be poorly tuned, hitboxes are janky and bad, and enemies are going to aimbot you to death from impossible distances, the rules of engagement are set. The odds are stacked against you, yes, but the rules are set. And when you figure them out, instead of being an aggravating constraint, they can liberate you to achieve victory. I love Elden Ring, and it's a great example of a great game worth experiencing. Lastly, at least for the sake of this video games are about connections. We remember the games that we love, and we go back to them when we want to reminisce. We play games with people online to form meaningful connections with strangers on the internet that we'd likely never interact with in real life. When you're in a cave, surrounded by bugs, low on ammo, and about to die, when someone says rock and stone, you say rock and stone back, because it's an experience you're sharing with someone who matters. For me, the game that I connect most to is called Pokemon Puzzle League. It's not a very popular game, nor was it very successful. Various iterations on the Tetris Attack formula have existed for Nintendo consoles up till around the 3DS era where they really fell off, but for all the whistles and bells they've tried to add, none of them really does it for me in just the same way. It's incredibly simple as a game. You make matches of 3 or more and make chains of matches to send garbage to your opponent, trying to fill their screen before they fill yours. When you make a match adjacent to garbage, it turns into a row of normal blocks and can enable you to make absurd levels of chains. Each time you match more than 3 blocks at once, your character says a voice line, and when you make chains, you get increasing intensity of Pokemon noises until I think 7 chains, then it just repeats the same metallic final sound, which definitely never gets old and definitely never throws off any of the people I play with out of sheer intimidation.
Smokes. How big?
A 9.
How big is that?
I only really play the one-player story mode because the other modes are either boring or not worth completing more than once. Every once in a while, the 2 friends willing to challenge me will get the urge to play again, and it's a great time. We don't ever play on equal footing, but with the rate at which the difficulty ramps up, providing a balancing factor, it's still a pretty good time. While my flabbers would be absolutely gasted if Game Freak made a good new take on Pokemon Puzzle League, I'm more surprised that there hasn't been an indie dev who's taken a stab at making their own version. Flip-On exists, but provided less than 3 hours of content overall, and it was just okay. Formally, if any developer out there is interested in working on a new take on the genre, I have a ton of concepts ready to go and I'm willing to help, so just let me know. However, the point is, Everyone has a game that they love, a pet game that they adore that they can always come back to that provides something that doesn't come from other games. Gaming is not all that distinct from other mediums of entertainment in the ways that we develop bonds to the characters, the stories, the experiences that we have as we play them. But the fact that they can stand on par with good movies, good TV shows, or good books says a lot about the value that video games can provide. I'm firmly of the opinion that people who say they're not interested in gaming at all simply haven't found the game that they click with. And while it's certainly not always worth it to find that one game, those who do will always find something very precious indeed. So yeah, to the surprise of absolutely no one who made it this far, I think video games are pretty neat. They provide some of the best entertainment, engagement, challenges, experiences, and connections that can be had in our digital era. Going to college taught me to read a video game like I read books, and I can honestly say that if I got nothing else out of my degree, that would be worth the thousands of dollars I spent. Video games are just as valuable a waste of time as any TV show, movie, or book, so don't let naysayers in your life tell you otherwise. If you have a game that gives you comfort or peace or happiness in a way that you can't get elsewhere, then treasure it. And also let me know in the comments, because I like hearing about the games people love. Anyway, please subscribe and like if you enjoy my stupid little videos. And again, thank you.